You are 24 years old. It's 300,000 BC. And you are watching the sun go down with a very specific, very old feeling sitting in your stomach. Because you cannot stop it. There is no switch, no lamp, no torch waiting by the door, and there is no door. The light is simply leaving. In about 20 minutes, everything you can see will shrink from a horizon down to nothing at all. Not dim, not gloomy, nothing. And out there, close enough to hear you breathing if it cared to, is something that can see all of this perfectly well. This isn't a metaphor. For almost all of human history, darkness was the single most dangerous condition a person could be in, and it arrived every night. So you already know the answer. Humans invented fire. Fire pushed back the dark, problem solved, roll the credits, put the kettle on. Except that isn't what happened. For roughly 1,000,000 years, humans could use fire, and almost certainly could not make it. Those are wildly different things, which means fire wasn't a tool you owned. It was a guest you kept alive. And if it died in the night, you did not simply get another one. So here's the real question, and it's still yours, tonight at the top of a dark staircase. Why are we, the safest and best lit animal that has ever existed, still quietly afraid of the dark? Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, and share it with your friends. Why can't we just see in the dark? Because you were never built for it, Pebble. Humans are daylight animals, and that goes all the way down into the hardware sitting in your eyes. You got a spectacular trait for it. Sharp daytime vision, rich color, the ability to spot ripe fruit in a tree or read a friend's face clean across a clearing. And the price for all that lovely daylight detail was the night. When the light drops below a certain point, your eyes just quietly run out of information. A cat crossing your room at midnight has no such problem. Neither does a hyena. Neither does more or less anything that has ever decided to hunt at night. So every single night, for hundreds of thousands of years, the rules of the entire world flipped over completely, and they flipped against you. And Gramps knows exactly why the dark is frightening. Gramps, as ever, has a theory, and he has been waiting all day to share it. In his version, the darkness itself is alive. A thing with a mind and a grudge. It hates you personally, and it waits. The dark isn't alive. It doesn't want anything. It's an absence, and no absence has ever hurt anyone. But Gramps is wrong about the mechanism and completely right about the feeling, because the dark never needed to hate you. It only had to hide the things that did. Your fear of the dark was never superstition. It was arithmetic. So you need light. Not for comfort, to live. Which takes us to the oldest fire anyone has ever found, and it is much older than you are expecting. So who lit the first fire ever? To find out, we go to a cave in the Kalahari Desert in South Africa called Wonderwork. And crucially, we don't stop at the entrance. We go deep inside. About 30 meters in, past the daylight, past any wind that ever blew, into a place the outside world simply cannot reach on its own. And in a layer of sediment about 1,000,000 years old, researchers found wood ash, burned bone, stone tools cracked and reddened by heat. All of it burned right there, in place. Not blown in by wind, not washed in by water. Something was burning inside that cave. And that's the whole ballgame. Because a grass fire out on the savannah does not travel 30 meters into solid rock. It physically cannot do it, which leaves exactly one explanation standing. Somebody carried it in. 1,000,000 years ago, somebody walked into the dark on purpose, holding fire. And that isn't us. Not Homo sapiens, we didn't exist. That's an ancestor. Someone a long way back down the family tree, doing something unmistakably human. And it just got older. Because researchers went back to Wonderwork with a genuinely strange new trick, and published it this year. They shine a narrow blue light onto ancient bone. Bone that was never heated does absolutely nothing. It just sits there, dull. But bone that once sat in a fire glows faintly red. Fire leaves a fingerprint inside the bone, and it is still in there 1,000,000 years later. They tested the deepest layers. Every white and gray fragment from the oldest one showed heating. Those layers run from 1 to nearly 1.8 million years old. Not one lucky night either. Over and over. A habit. Fire was already part of life down there long before our species turned up at all. So that's it. 1,000,000 years ago, we cracked fire. Except the people who dug it up are careful to say something else entirely. Wait, how did they light it? Here's the uncomfortable answer. At Wonderwork, they probably didn't. The evidence points to fire they found somewhere else and brought home. Lightning strikes. Wildfires. The savannah handed you fire occasionally, at random on its own schedule, and you took whatever you were given. Now sit with what that means for your actual life. You are not a fire owner, you are a fire borrower, and the loan can be called in at any moment. Rain, a gust of wind, one night where nobody watched it closely enough, and you are back to being a blind animal in a black field. Naturally, Uncle Rocco has a solution to this. He has drawn up plans. He has in fact drawn up several. Rocco's fire machine does not work, nor does the next one, nor the 11 after that. And this is not a joke at Rocco's expense. It's the actual shape of the problem. Making fire out of nothing is genuinely brutally hard, and it took our species an almost unbelievable stretch of time to manage it. So, in the meantime, you don't solve it. You do the other thing. You simply never ever let it go out, which creates a job. Possibly the most important job that has ever existed on this planet. Somebody has to keep the ember alive. And when the family moves camp, the fire does not get left behind. It travels, carefully, in somebody's hands the whole way. And we're not guessing at that. When anthropologists sat with Juhansi elders in the Kalahari, that is exactly what the elders described. An ember taken from the fire at the old camp, carried to the new one, and used to start the fire there. Not a new fire. The same fire moved. Which means your fire could be older than you are, older than your mother, possibly older than anyone at that camp can actually remember. And Ivy has been waiting, very patiently, to ruin this for me. Hold on. How does anybody know they couldn't make fire? You weren't there. Nobody was there. Correct, and it's the right question. So here's the evidence. From a cave in Israel called Tabun, which has 16 meters of stacked human history sitting inside it. Researchers counted burnt flint all the way through it. Deep down, in the older layers, almost none of the stone shows any heat damage at all. Then, at around 350,000 years ago, the count jumps. Cracked stone, reddened stone, fire constantly from that line upward. That's the moment fire stops being occasional and becomes routine. Every day. On demand. And the researchers suggested that jump might be when people learn to kindle it themselves. Might. And then they said the honest part out loud. There is currently no way to directly determine how those ancient fires were started. So it stays a hypothesis. Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, and share it with your friends. So where do we put it? In another Israeli cave, Kizim, archaeologists found a hearth about 300,000 years old. And it isn't the fire that stops you, it's the repetition. Not one fire. Layer on layer of ash in the very same place. They came back to that exact spot again and again for generations. And ringed around it, the debris of an entire life, the stone tools, the butchered bone, the work. All of it arranged around the fire. That's not a campfire. That's a center. That's a place a room gets organized around. 300,000 years ago, humans had a floor plan, and we never stopped. Look at where the television goes. Look at where the fireplace sits in a house that has central heating and does not need one. So, light, warmth, safety, an address, that's the story you came here for. And it is the smallest part of what fire actually did to us. But what did they do all night? That, Pebble, is the thing fire really invented, and nobody planned it. Because before fire, the dark hours were dead hours. You couldn't hunt, couldn't gather, couldn't do anything. After fire, you had hours where you were awake, warm, safe together, and completely unable to do a single scrap of useful work. Fire didn't just push back the dark. It manufactured a brand new kind of time that had never existed anywhere before. And we had to fill it with something. And in the 1970s, an anthropologist did something almost embarrassingly obvious that nobody had done before. She wrote down what people actually say around a fire. She compared 174 conversations among the Juhansi, the daytime ones against the nighttime ones. And they were not the same conversations at all. Daytime talk was work. Who's going where? Who owes what? Who's been lazy? Who is annoying everybody? Practical, economic, and a fair amount of complaining. Useful, necessary. Also, frankly, a bit grim. Daytime talk is mostly how a group keeps itself in line. Then the sun went down, and the same people at the same fire turned into different people entirely. Night talk steered away from the day's tensions completely. Singing, dancing, ceremony, and above everything else, stories. Stories about real people. People who had died. People living far away. People they would never actually meet. The night talk went places the day talk never could. And that firelight talk did work that nothing else did. It fired the imagination. It healed the rifts the day had torn open. It taught you who everyone was, how the whole thing worked, and why you could trust somebody you had never once laid eyes on. Nobody taught that in a lesson. It arrived in stories at night, because fire had built a room where stories were the only thing left to do. So Gramps was wrong about the living dark, but Gramps himself only exists because of the fire. We didn't light a fire to keep the dark out. We lit it to make somewhere to sit. The dark stopped being the enemy and became the room. And here's the part we will never ever have. Ash survives, burnt bone survives, a spark does not. Somewhere on one specific night, one specific person made light instead of finding it, for the first time on this planet. We can't date it. We can't name them. Researchers still argue over whether Neanderthals could do it at all. Some say they struck their own, others say they only ever borrowed. The most important night in human history is one we cannot find. Now come back. It's tonight. You're in a sealed room, on a lit street, on a planet where nothing has hunted you in a very long time. There's a green light on your router, a glow under the door. You are never truly in the dark, and it still gets you. That fear isn't a flaw. It's a receipt. It's the oldest thing you own. And look at what you're doing right now, sitting in a dark room, staring into a bright rectangle, letting a voice tell you a story about people you'll never meet. We never left the fire. We just carry it in our pockets now. We never conquered the dark. We only ever learned to sit together in it. So they were awake, safe, and talking. Which raises a slightly rude question about what exactly was cooking on that fire. That story's one tap away. I'm the Ancient Bro. Keep the fire lit. Please subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, and share it with your friends.